Hi everybody, thank you so much for spending some time with me. Today we're going to talk about the wheat and the tares. Now before we start though, I want to present something to you that Leanne in our Discord Bible study group shared. She showed us a 5-minute video presenting a huge statue that's going to be coming to 21 cities near you. This statue is covered with LED lights. Its arms move, its head moves, it speaks, it sings, it will give words of wisdom. It's a huge collaboration between many artists and scientists, and it absolutely lends to fulfilling Bible prophecy. So I've put the link to that video down in the description box, and you will definitely want to watch that video and see what all it does and how quickly it can change its skin, and you can have your picture taken. It's supposed to be rolled out in 2021. So they've been keeping this rather well veiled from us. I think you're going to be very interested in it. Okay, it just goes to show you how quickly Bible prophecy will start rolling out when they start putting all these pieces together that they've been making behind the scenes. And now is a good time for us to be studying the parable of the wheat and the tares. I often see this parable being referred to when people are talking about the rapture. And although it certainly looks like it has some rapture elements, it really, if we don't have it placed on the right area of our timeline, it's going to bring a lot of confusion. So I have posted on the screen our timeline, and I've tried to present a graphic to you in various different ways and explain it in different ways, because I know everybody learns a little bit differently, and also we all kind of need to hear things a few times before it sinks in, because sadly only a small percentage of our churches are teaching Bible prophecy. And Revelation 19:10 says, "The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy." So when you sit down to read the scriptures, it's always helpful to ask the Lord to pour out on you the spirit of prophecy so that you can understand what you're reading, because of all the generations since the church age began 2,000 years ago, this is the generation that needs to be studying Bible prophecy, because things are happening very quickly, and this will help you make prudent decisions for your family, for yourself and your family. So if you want to look at your graph here, you'll see that at the beginning we've got Enoch, the pre-tribulation rapture, and that rapture represents the bride. And you know what is so wonderful about being a Bible prophecy student in these days is you can tell your pastor that he can start talking about the rapture, because most pastors are afraid to do that because it does create division, because so many believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, many believe in a mid-tribulation rapture, and many believe in a post-tribulation rapture. And so because of that division and differences of opinions, I can understand why pastors might want to avoid that subject. But I'm here to tell the pastors you can present good news, because they're all right. There is a pre-tribulation rapture, there is a mid-tribulation rapture, and what appears to be a post-tribulation rapture is actually where the parable of the wheat and the tares happen. And so I'm just hoping that this video is a help to not only the lay people in the congregation and Bible study teachers, but also the pastors who watch this channel. I appreciate all of you. I know you have a hard job, and you've got a lot of pressure coming at you from many different directions. So the timeline that I'm presenting today is the Enoch pre-tribulation rapture, which represents the rapture of the Gentile bride. But the tribulation does not start at that moment. No, there is a small gap, because the 7 years that is described in Daniel, the Daniel's 70th week. That 7-year tribulation period does not begin until there is a covenant signed. Now, we know that gap does not need to be too long because the globalists have everything ready to fulfill all the events in the book of Revelation. 5 years ago, I could not have said that to you. But now that so much technology has been revealed to us, we can actually see and compare it with the science magazines and science journalists that there is the technology to fulfill everything in the book of Revelation. So this is another reason why we need to have an open ear and pay attention to what is going on in the world around us. So we know that there is a short gap. It could be 10 days, I don't know, a week, a month. It could be a year, I don't know, 6 months. I don't know. None of us know that. Maybe it's hidden somewhere in Scripture. There is a detail where we can learn how long that gap is. But as of right now, I don't know how long of a gap it is. It's not very long, though. Okay, so after the bride is raptured up, and then an agreement is signed, a covenant is signed with Israel, well, for 3.5 years, Israel will continue to grow in her global power. At the same time, 2 witnesses will arise in Jerusalem and be calling out the sins of Israel. And at the same time, there will be 144 witnesses that go all over the world. They pick up the baton that the church drops. They pick up the gospel and they fulfill the Great Commission. And they are all going to be greatly persecuted for it. These 144,000 Jews will be terribly persecuted, much like Paul, and probably even worse. Okay, so now some of you might think, well, that's kind of a weird thing. How is Israel growing in global power? Well, just for instance, currently in Israel, there are over 6,000 just startup businesses, enterprises. Over 30 of these startups are technology companies collectively valued at over $1 billion US. You know, that is more than all of Europe's startups combined. You know, people don't just start up new enterprises unless they were very confident in their country's position in military and economics and that kind of a thing. Well, these startups include areas of mathematics, science, chemistry, physics, optics, medicine, biotechnology. And that is something you want to really keep your eye on, is what biotechnology is being used around the world right now. What companies are engaged in biotechnology? How is it being used? Going on, some of the startups include computer hardware and mobile software, robotics. Yeah, robots are being used for many things. Defense, of course, agriculture and breeding, energy, consumer goods and appliances, and games, video games. I think that might go along with the optics startups. Okay, now for those of you who think that the nation of Israel is all weak and spends all of our resources defending themselves, and for those of you who think that the current administration in our nation, the USA, under number 46, if you're thinking that number 46 is against Israel, well, let me just present some facts here. Number 46's president, all of his children are married to Jews. Now, why would you be anti-Semitic if all your children are married to Jews? In fact, number 45, 4 of his children were married to Jews. Not that I'm saying that's good or bad. I'm just establishing the fact that the USA is consistently pro-Israel. What they say is one thing, but what they do is another. Last I could find in my research, 89 of our congressmen and senators have Israeli citizenship. So, don't be thinking that the USA is anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-policies against Israel. We give millions of dollars to Israel every year, consistently. So, Israel is gaining in global power, position, and in a minute we're going to talk about why that is. And it's biblical that this will happen. She is gaining in her own strength. Now, we love Israel. The best way to bless Israel is to bring the knowledge of Messiah to her, to support Messianic Jewish missionary projects. The people that are most effective at bringing the gospel to the Jews are Jews themselves who have recognized that Jesus is their Messiah. We call them Messianic Jews. So I encourage you to financially support Messianic Jewish missionaries. Pray for them. Pray for their new converts. Pray for Israel. That is the best way to bless Israel. That's the way God intended for the church to bless Israel, was to pray that she comes into recognition of her Messiah, who is Yeshua, Jesus. All right, that was just a little point I wanted to add there, because we are not anti-Semitic. The church loves Israel. We support Israel. All right? Okay, so for 3.5 years, as that covenant is being followed, and the gospel is going around all over the world, and the Jews who are involved in evangelizing are being persecuted by their own brethren and the globalists. Well, mid-tribulation will be what I call the Elijah rapture, and that represents the attendance of the groom. And at that point, mid-trib, is when the person that Israel has signed an agreement with, now we don't know if it's just 7 years, it could be a 20-year agreement, but we know that it's going to be broken after 3.5 years. So don't be looking for an agreement that's 7 years. That the criteria is it's going to be broken, the covenant, after 3.5 years. And that's when Israel will realize that the person they came into an agreement with is the beast system. And there's a lot of references throughout the scriptures of what happens at mid-trib. For some reason, God wants the whole world to know when mid-tribulation is. We know that Germany has a fake sun. We know that China has a fake moon. I don't know. Are the days going to be messed up? Is the calendar going to be messed up? Well, and a lot of people right now are trying to set a timeline based on trumpet, seals, vials, and I'm thinking that is going to be, the interpretation for those things are going to be left for those involved in the tribulation. We don't need to be setting our timeline on those. For one thing, they could be overlapped. They could all be happening at the same time. There's nothing in Revelation that indicates they last and they happen boom, 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 that one is finished and they go into another. Because a lot of this is in the Old Testament. Okay, after the mid-trib, there's 3.5 years called the time of Jacob's trouble. And that is when the Arab nations surrounding Israel, the covenant's going to be broken, they're going to flood Israel, they're going to level Jerusalem. That won't happen until the mid-trib area, when the time of Jacob's trouble happens. Well, after that 3.5 years, now is where we have the parable of the wheat and tares. Because if God does not stop the Gentiles from hunting down, pursuing the Jews, there won't even be a remnant of them left. So at just the right time, at the fullness of the Gentiles, When they've fulfilled the number of days that God's going to allow them to fulfill, that's when God steps in. By then, there will be a remnant of Jews that know Yeshua is their Messiah. So that's when we learn about the parable of the wheat and the tares. Even Jesus tells us it's at the end of the age. We know that the Enoch rapture, that's not the end of the age. We know that the Elijah rapture at mid-trib, that's not the end of the age. The end of the age will be at post-tribulation. Jesus has won his wars, and that's where the tares are gathered, bundled, and thrown into the fire. That's what Matthew 13:30, 38, and 40 tell us. The sons of the kingdom will be snatched up. Sounds like a rapture, but it's not. They are translated to Jerusalem. The righteous sons of the kingdom are snatched, translated physically in their mortal bodies to Jerusalem, and put in God's barn. That is in verse 30. The sons of the kingdom will be given wedding garments to attend the marriage feast. They missed the wedding, but they are the friends of the groom. Matthew 22:11, 12, and 13 tell us this. And the sons of the kingdom will remain in their mortal bodies. Matthew 13:38 and 43. Because they are going to help repopulate the globe after post-tribulation. All right? Now, I'm hoping this helps you, because when you're reading end-time passages, like let's say Joel, for instance, Obadiah, there's portions out of Isaiah. It's important to determine if they are the pre-trib Enoch rapture passages or mid-trib Elijah rapture of the attendance of the groom, or are they post-trib translation of the friends of the groom. They'll miss the wedding, but they are invited to the marriage feast after the Battle of Armageddon. Okay, then there's something else really interesting I want to show you, if I can do that really quickly. Let me change screens here. I want to talk about Psalm 90:10, because that too is often used for a rapture. Well, that is true, but it's for the Elijah rapture. Let me read Psalm 90:10 to you. As for the days of our life, they contain 70 years, or if due to strength, 80. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow, for soon it is gone and we fly away. Okay, this is where God promised Israel a rapture. It's several places throughout the Old Testament. You kind of have to know what you're looking for. Do some word searches and you'll find it. Okay, well, if due to strength, Israel will make it to 80 years. Now, look at that mid-trib chart. They're going to be very strong and full of pride all the way up to mid-tribulation. So, we can consider that the mid-tribulation rapture is when Israel is 80 years old, fulfills her 80th year. All right? Well, in 2021, Israel is 73 years old. Add 7 years, that's 2028. That's when she'll be 80 years old. The last day that Israel is 80 years old is right about mid-May 2029. All right? So we're kind of thinking that that's the latest time for the mid-tribulation. All right? So the ones who fly away in verse 90, verse 10, are the two witnesses, the 144,000 Jews, and all the converts who are awake and alert at that time. Now we know they will have converts that are not awake. They will be Sardis and Laodicean, because you see, those 7 letters, prophecies are cyclical. The church uses those prophecies, and the new converts are going to be using those prophecies. I hope that's making sense. If not, I hope you feel free to ask me. And not that I know everything, but you guys ask amazing questions. I really appreciate that, and I learn a lot when I'm digging in. Now, another interesting detail about Psalm 90 that's often overlooked is that Moses wrote Psalm 90. In fact, he was 80 years old when he stood before Pharaoh saying, "Let my people go." He was 80 years old. That's when God started using him in a powerful way. Could it be God was waiting for Moses to have all of his natural strength spent? This is one of the reasons why God is going to allow the beast to break the covenant and start chasing Israel, because Israel has so much strength, so much prestige, so many resources, so much pride, that they need to be humbled. They need to be humbled so that they will finally call out to their Messiah. God brought you and I to that point also in our life, when we were out of our own strength, when we recognized our need for Jesus Christ. That is when we called out for him. If you do not belong to a Bible prophecy teaching church or Bible study, get in touch with me. We've made a little bit of room to take in a few more students in our Discord Bible prophecy group. And we're very private, very small, so you'll have to get in touch with me and we'll extend the invitation. And I just want to provide a functioning body that you can jump into, especially those of you who are not attending a brick and mortar church and you're believers. I do believe it's important to be a functioning member of the body of Christ, where you are learning and contributing and praying for the saints. So if you are needing a group like this, you are invited, but you'll have to get in touch with me and I'll send you a special link that will invite you. Let me see I think that's about all I want to cover today, and I think my time is about up. So I hope this has helped. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!